So we're going to walk through building a simple GraphQL API using StepZen. And so again, I know you all are going to learn about GraphQL, so we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm going to show you that even using StepZen, basically, you're going to be using GraphQL. It's not like, oh, let me use something that's completely proprietary. Where everything in StepZen, there are some pieces that are StepZen specific, but everything is GraphQL. So that's what's kind of cool. So you can learn both at the same time. Okay, so I guess the first question would be like, okay, you're here because you're convinced you want to know GraphQL, so why should you care about StepZen particularly as a way to do that? So, one of the things that, I've been doing, for instance, Jamstack development for a really long time. And one of the things that I've struggled with as a Jamstack developer is that there's often a lot of data connections that are going on in an application. So like, I was even just talking about this yesterday in a different presentation. I was just showing off a relatively simple site that I had that doesn't do a lot. It just has some authentication and some search and some other little pieces going on, but it's not particularly complex. And yet there was, I think, counted 6 different APIs I'm connecting in different sources. So you might have like databases, you might have internal REST APIs, you might have third-party REST APIs, you might have some other services that you might connect to, like that maybe REST, but you're connecting using their SDKs or whatever it is. Typically, front-end developers are dealing with a lot of data from a lot of sources, and that can get really complex. I thought this picture kind of summed it up. I feel like sometimes you're just trying to wire everything together and trying to figure out how to pull all those pieces to make a coherent actual front-end project is difficult. In fact, one of the things that you often end up doing is you say, okay, I need to go get this REST API and get that data to get the ID for this, to then go to this other one and say, okay, using this ID, give me this other data. And then I bring that data back and I try and stitch it together into something that I need for my front end. And if any of you have done this before, it can get kind of complex, kind of like this guy's job, which I don't even know how he managed to do this. So StepZen handles the complexity of this wiring for multiple backends. You can use things like MySQL or Postgres for databases. You can use your internal or third-party REST APIs. We have a bunch of pre-built connectors for popular backend services. So all of that is built into the system to help you manage like pulling in all these different multiple data sources, wiring those pieces together without writing a lot of code, without having to do the complex logic involved in kind of stitching pieces together. So it exposes an easy to consume GraphQL API to the front end. So basically, I mean, we're here because we all want to learn GraphQL, and that's what StepZen generates. Basically, you write some GraphQL on the back end, it's going to generate the GraphQL on the front end. If any of you have had any interest in looking into building GraphQL APIs, I mean, one of the reasons I joined StepZen is because I was interested in GraphQL, but I was like, oh, I gotta write resolvers and all this, and then I gotta write the schema code, and it's all kind of complicated and it's a little overwhelming. So this makes it easy to get started without having to learn about writing resolvers and doing all the data connections on your own. It's all handled for you. So obviously, we'll learn more about GraphQL, but the keys of GraphQL is like two of the key things is you get only the data you need. So when you write a query, you don't need to like REST will expose to a huge list of data that comes back from that endpoint. I may only need a few items, but it'll send it back to me every time, all of it anyway. Well, with GraphQL, I say, okay, I only need those items and that's all I get. Whereas I can also get all the data I need. So by that, I mean, like, I don't have to hit multiple endpoints to get different pieces of data and then pull those pieces together. I can actually hit one GraphQL endpoint and I get all those pieces at once. And again, you'll learn more when you learn more about GraphQL in the workshop coming up. So the key thing about StepZen to me is that you do all of this with minimal code and configuration. Again, we're not writing resolvers. We're not doing all kinds of like complex logic on the back end, having to learn how to build a GraphQL server. That's all handled for you. It's all kind of serverless, and you just write your GraphQL schema and give it some little syntactic sugar, and boom, you got your GraphQL API. So it's enough talking about that. I wanted to actually show you how this works. So we're going to code something. For those of you who haven't already done so, you can go and maybe someone will pop this in the chat for me to sign up for StepZen. We've opened up our we are an alpha product right now, so we are looking for your feedback. But we've opened it up for you to sign up. It's free, so don't worry about it. We're not going to be suddenly charging your credit card or anything. We don't ask for any of that to sign up. It's just a quick and easy sign up with your email. So you go to stepzen.com/request-invite. Once you've done that, and assuming you already have, you will need the StepZen CLI, which you can install via npm. So it's npm install. It's a global install, so -g StepZen. And you will need to log in. So you do that once the CLI is installed. You do StepZen login to log in. And then what you'll need your account name and API key, which once you have an account, you go to my.stepzen.com/account, and you'll be able to see your account name and your API key that you'll need. You'll basically supply that once to the CLI, and you're logged in, and then it knows your account and will manage everything from that point on. So we created this this endpoint here. It's really a simple fake REST endpoint that's about riders and bikes and rides and stuff like that. Just for the sake of this simple demo, so that we can show you. You can explore it at that URL I'm going to show you here. We've got a few different endpoints here. I mean, you can't see it all that well, but it's just a very simple REST endpoint that sends me back a bunch of data about bike riders and rides and bikes and so on. So that's what that is. And I'm going to show you how to kind of use these little endpoints to create a GraphQL API very, very quickly. So let me put that back to actual size. I'm going to show you some other stuff. All right. So the next step would be I'll walk through this actually in person myself, but we're going to make a directory. I called mine SZ hackathon just to kind of, for the StepZen hackathon or whatever. And then we're going to create this GraphQL file. Now, what you might notice here is that, like, if you have seen any GraphQL schema definitions, this is just a typical GraphQL schema definition. This is not like some StepZen specific code here. Okay, so I'm going to show you how that works. Let me get out. I'm sorry, I'm going to pop in and out of the slides, but they cover when I'm working, and then I have to kind of get back to my command line and so on and so forth. So we're gonna go ahead and make that directory, and now I'm in the SC hackathon, and then I'm gonna open up my code, Visual Studio Code here. Okay, and then I'm gonna create that new file. I'm gonna call it. I don't know why I said I called it mountain. It should be rider. I apologize that. So I'm going to call it rider.graphql. And then I'm going to put this code in here. So all this is a GraphQL type. You'll learn more about this in a little bit. This GraphQL type, and I've put some properties on that GraphQL type and told it what type of data it is. And save that. And then this specific to I need to create an index, and then all file does is basically, here's the files that make up my schema. So in this case, the only file in my schema is this rider.graphql. So that let me see.
Brian?
Yes.
Sorry, you cut off a bit after.
Yeah, I noticed my internet went away, right, for a second. I apologize about that. What did you all miss? Okay, so I'll walk back a few steps. I apologize. So I've gone ahead and I've created this GraphQL type called rider in a rider.graphql file. And I've defined this type rider with some properties and the types of data that it returns and indicating it's required. I've defined a query, which is I want to be able to get a rider by their ID. And so this is a typical GraphQL schema definition. There's nothing specific to StepZen here. I did create an index.graphql, which is something required by StepZen. And all this does is say, in my schema, these are the files that make up my schema. So in this case, rider.graphql is the only file I've created that's part of my schema. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my terminal, and then I'm going to go ahead and run StepZen start, which is kind of our special command to test this schema. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call this schema API/SE hackathon. So this name is just basically tells you where the endpoint's going to be. It's so you can be whatever you want. Just make it something relatively easy to remember. But then when I hit the URL for the endpoint, this is going to determine what that URL is. So it's deploying. Okay. So it's deployed, and then as soon as I deploy it, I'm going to enlarge this here. It runs this. This is a tool called GraphQL. It's a common tool in GraphQL. Basically, GraphQL will allow me to kind of run queries and test queries here. And one of the great things about GraphQL is GraphQL has code hinting. So so you can even, like here, if you click the Explorer, I can go over here, and there's my query that we talked about. And I want the first name, well, ID, and last name, and I'm just gonna give it. You notice I haven't done anything yet. I haven't connected to any data sources, but immediately, oh well, that didn't work. I apologize. Let's see. It should be giving me back mock data. It's not right now. So let's try something. I'm gonna try something here. This should work. Yeah, there we go. I had to put this special directive in there. I thought it wasn't required, but I guess it still is. So this little mock directive tells it I want a mock data. So now that I've done that, I can actually already run queries that get me fake data from this API, and I can test it that way. But I don't want to just create fake data, right? I want to get real data. So let's see how to do that. All right, so go back into code here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this mock because I don't want mock data anymore. And I'm going to go ahead and connect this to a REST endpoint. So let me go add this in here, and I'll walk you through what this says real quick. I've now added two queries. That rider query has a REST endpoint, and all I've done here is say, well, here's the endpoint, which is that Heroku app that was running that I shared earlier. That's the endpoint, and I'm passing the ID here in that $ID. That's the ID that's passed as an argument here, is being replaced in that path. And same thing here for the writers query. Well, the writers query is just getting all the writers actually, but all I do is supply an endpoint then. So I'm not even passing any data through to this. It's just get me all the writers. And this one is get me this writer by this ID. And then we know we can pass that variable in here. So if I save that, that should already upload because StepZen start will just kind of watch things. If I go back here, now if I run this, I should actually get real data. That's it. All I've done is supply the REST endpoint, and I'm getting real data. So I should point out though, like while this is all valid GraphQL, this is a StepZen specific directive. So this is kind of like that syntactic sugar I mentioned earlier that makes StepZen be able to do the magic it does. Okay, so normally you'd be writing resolvers and stuff to do all this kind of logic, but in here all we've done is supply the endpoint and we're done. So next step, I want to go ahead and connect two types just to show you how you start to create a real API here. So I'm going to go ahead and create another type here called bike.graphql. All right, so my bike is going to say which bike that a particular rider rides. So I'm going to skip a few steps here, and we're not going to like just do the mock and all that stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and put everything. It's very, very similar to what you saw earlier. I've got a query called bike, and I'm passing a model in here as an argument, and then I'm passing that model back here to the API endpoint, and then I'm calling all the bikes as well, so that so I can get all bikes if I want to. So that should already have, oh, no, I don't want to open Slack. Sorry, wrong button. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and refresh this so I can reload my new API, and I want to close that. And I should have uploaded that. Oh, dummy me. I always miss this step. I always miss this step. All right, I need to add that here, don't I? StepZen doesn't even know about that file yet. There we go. Okay, so now if I give it a second, I should upload it. Yep, there it is. It's already there. I can query for bike and I give it, I don't know the model. So let's do all bikes. We're going to type model, description, color. Boom. And there we go. We're getting all the different kinds of bikes that are in this particular API. So that's working already. So let's go back into code, and now we have bikes and we have riders, but they're not connected in any way. So I want to be able to connect them, and then we're going to do something called something specific to two StepZen here. We're going to use another StepZen specific directive, which is called @materializer. I'm going to add that into my rider. So basically what I've done here is I've said I have a bike property of my rider that returns a bike, which is that bike type that I created earlier. And then I use this directive to say, I want to call the query bike. Again, going back here, that query here is bike. I'm calling that query, and I'm saying pass these arguments. I'm going to pass the argument, an argument of the name model, and I'm going to use the field bike model. So bike model here is a property of this particular type. And model, if you remember, is the argument that this is expecting here. Okay, so all I've done, that's all I've had to do. It's pretty simple, I hope, to understand. And now if I go here and I refresh this and I go to rider, and then I'm going to say rider ID1. I'm going to say I want to get the rider, his first name and last name, the bike model, but now I'm going to also get the description and color and type of the bike from the bike type. And boom, there we go. So now we've connected two different pieces. Imagine this was two different endpoints. Imagine I had an API that gives me bikes and an API that gives me riders. And I have now just said, okay, I'm going to take both those endpoints. They might even be two different completely, like if you imagine if you were dealing with shipping or whatever, and you had, one company giving you data for one thing and another company giving you data, and you could tie these two pieces together. And in one query with one GraphQL endpoint, I'm able to get all of that data at once. So that's the beauty. That's where I said it gives you all the data you need and only the data you need. So like I specify which properties I want. It only gives me that, but I can get everything. I can connect all different kinds of types in a single, there's only one endpoint for me to hit, and I can get all that data. So let me just run back to my slides real quick. I did actually run through these steps here. We've done all this. We queried it with mock data. We created our rider type, and we created the bike type and queries, and we tied it all together with @materializer. And this is the step that I forgot, and my slides tell me to remember it, and I should have paid more attention to my slides. And we queried it and got everything. Okay, so we were successful. So the next steps obviously is a hackathon challenge. I want you to go ahead and, like, when you do this, think about like a REST. You don't have to use a REST API. I showed you REST APIs. You can actually use databases, as I mentioned earlier. So if you have a database you can connect to, or you want to just create one and hook up the connection, you can do that. If you're thinking about how you might build something, I kind of challenge you to think about like ways you might be able to tie different APIs together to make something really cool. I'll show you a quick example of that before I turn it over. I built this, so I wrote this post about creating a developer portfolio using Dev and GitHub. I don't know if any of you know dev.to. It's a great site for developers, particularly if you're getting into, like, if you're new to development, but also honestly for anybody. I've been doing it for 20 years and I love that site. So what I wanted to do was create a blog, a portfolio that took my posts that I've posted to dev.to and my profile and project information that was on GitHub, and I wanted to combine it, and that's what this is. So this is my little Zen blog. So the point here is this information, like the title and the body of the post, is all coming from dev.to. And then this information, like my profile information, is all coming from from GitHub. So like if I go to about, this is my GitHub information and my repositories, but all the blog posts are coming from dev2, and it kind of on this page, it's combining both in a single piece. And I've got one query kind of pulling from both those sources. So it's just to kind of give you some ideas of ways you can use this. And then obviously, if you get that far, like build a front end that consumes these APIs, I think you'll learn a little bit more about consuming GraphQL. It's really easy. You can do it using standard JavaScript, or there's lots of libraries out there that make it really easy to consume GraphQL on your front end. You don't have to use React if you don't want to, but you can obviously if you want to. So it's not like a React specific technology. So